Okay, so this is the first lesson in the unit on sentences, and I know what you're probably thinking. Good heavens, I'm in college now. Why are we still talking about sentences? I've been doing this since grade school, and that's a legitimate question. I understand where you're coming from, but let me offer a rationale as to why we are starting here. First and foremost, it's part of the core objectives for this course. So if you look at the first bullet point, you can see there that I'm tasked with teaching you to write understandable, efficient sentences. And I think oftentimes we take sentences for granted because we've been writing them for so long. We think we've mastered this concept. We understand how to order words together to create meaning. However, I want you to start thinking about writing, at least the writing you'll do in this course and in a number of your other courses in your college career, as a form of telepathy. So you're getting what's in your brain out in a symbolized way so that somebody else that's not you can look at what you've written and understand what you were thinking. So the writing that we'll be doing in this course is audience-oriented. You are writing with a specific reader in mind. You are aware of an outside consumer of your ideas, and you have formed the sentences in a way that is understandable for them. All right, so I'm drawing your attention to the word there, understandable. It's also efficient, right? So I'm supposed to teach you to write efficient sentences. And you'll hear me use the word concise repeatedly this semester. You'll probably get quite sick of hearing me asking you to be more concise. And what I mean is I want you to use only the amount of words necessary to get your idea across. Now, I don't want you to be reductive or elementary or juvenile. I don't want you to use like caveman language, but I want you to use evocative, descriptive words that also take into consideration the transmission of that idea. So not using a million words when 3 would do, right? All right, so that's the first bullet point. The second bullet point is pretty much the bane of every English teacher's existence. It's probably why we don't have many other friends outside of other English teachers because, people think we walk around speaking in thesis statements with red pens just correcting everything everybody says, which is only partially true. But I want to pause on this bullet point for just a second. In my years of teaching writing, I've seen that a lot of mistakes occur at the sentence level. And I believe if we take some time to just pause and reconsider the sentence, that a lot of those mistakes can be cleared up. But I also want to dispel the notion that there is one way to write, that there's one set of rules for the English language. The brand of English that you're going to use in this course is called Standard American or Standard Academic English, for short SAE. This isn't the only kind of English, right? If you go to the land of my people in the southern part of the United States, there are many different dialects of English, and all in their controlled systems, they are correct. Grammar itself, we've sort of attached many different meanings to the word grammar. We sort of, conflate mechanics and syntax and spelling and pronunciation all under the term grammar, but all grammar means is the ordering of words. Okay, so in different dialects, there are different rules that are consistent. So if you go to the South, you'll hear different pronunciations and different ways of speaking. If you go to other parts of the country and hear African American vernacular English, there are different dialects and different ways of speaking. And this is not to say that those are incorrect by any stretch of the imagination. The rules that they use are consistent within those systems of the language. In this class, however, I'll be using and will be using in formal writing assignments Standard American or Standard Academic English. And there are general conventions and rules for usage and grammar and so on and so forth. So I am tasked as well with teaching you that. And like I said, I think that much of that can be cleared up at the sentence level. Okay, so throughout these lessons, hopefully we'll gain greater confidence in our sentence fluency, meaning that you will feel much more confident in your ability to vary sentences for style, but also to aid the transmission of information. Okay, so if sentences are one of the bedrock foundational principles that we have in transmitting ideas and information from my brain to somebody else's brain, then we need to be able to effectively control how that happens. And if you think about the word control, there's an sort of an accepted underlying principle of understanding. So you have to understand something before you can control it. Okay, moving along. This is a foundational sort of series of lessons. So if you think about, your math classes growing up, you first learned what a number was, and then you went to subtraction and addition and multiplication and division before you got into calculus and algebra and sort of the more abstract concepts. We'll be taking a similar approach here. So if sentences are one of the foundational ways to understand how we write, and then sentences can be combined into paragraphs, and paragraphs can be combined into arguments, and arguments can be extended and extended and extended, then it makes sense that we start at sentences. And look, of course, we could go back further. You can interrogate language all day long. How do words come to be? How do we negotiate their meanings? Do we have a shared understanding for what a word is? Is language even neutral? The answer to that is no. So yeah, look, we could go back further, but we'll probably do that in class discussions. For now, we are going to delve into sentences. I'd also like for you to key in on the vocabulary that I repeatedly use, because I want you to know what I'm talking about when I say those things in my feedback to you, when I use those terms in class. I want you to at least understand the concepts. Okay, so let's jump right in here. Oh, and just one more thing. If this is something you feel really, really confident in as far as your abilities go, then I encourage you to move ahead more quickly. However, I would also encourage you to stop from time to time and check in with the video lessons to make sure that you are tracking, that you understand the concepts and the terms, so that you don't get left behind. Okay. Before we jump into sentences head first, we need to understand clauses. And there are two different types of clauses. The first one we're going to look at is the independent clause, which is also called the main clause. As I'll show you in just a second, independent clauses are also simple sentences. But I'd like for you to be able to think about independent clauses and simple sentences a little bit differently, because I think this will help you in future lessons, like when we get to complex sentences. If you can think about these things not as simple sentences, but as independent clauses, I think it'll help you internalize those ideas. So an independent clause has a subject, a verb, and a complete idea. Sometimes there's a direct object for that verb, something that receives the action. Sometimes not, but this is basically it. Okay, so here's an example. She hated him. She is the subject, hated is the verb, and then he or him here receives the hate, right? It receives the action. That's called a direct object. And you can hear that once I've finished reading that, she hated him, the idea is complete. You don't need any other words or any other information to make sense of that utterance. It's done. You can put a period there. Okay, so let's look at another one, maybe something a little longer. The guitar sounded warm and inviting. Again, we have a subject performing action. The guitar is the subject. It sounded. And then we have the words warm and inviting to describe how it sounded. Okay, so subject, verb, and once I was done reading that, you can hear that the idea is complete. There's no other information needed to make sense of that. This is the most common formation of a sentence in the English language. We usually go subject, verb, and object if necessary. Of course, this isn't the only way to write a sentence. As we'll see in the future, we can definitely vary this, and sentence variation is important for your reader and for the transmission of information. Okay. The second type of clause is called a dependent clause. It's also called a subordinate clause. So if you ever hear the word subordinate, it's synonymous with dependent. And if you think about the word dependent, its definition is right there. So a dependent clause depends on something else for its meaning to be completed. So let me give you the sort of breakdown of what a dependent clause is. It's very similar to an independent clause, but it does not complete an idea. So there will be a subject, and there will be a verb that the subject is doing, but it does not have a complete idea. Okay? So both clauses have subjects and verbs. Okay? But only one has a complete idea. I took the sentence I had up here as an independent clause, and I put it down here as well, and I added the word although. And just by adding the word although, I have changed this from an independent clause to a dependent clause. Okay, I still have a subject, she. I still have a verb, him. But if you listen to it, although she hated him, you can hear that the idea is not complete. The word although sets up the need for more information. Right? Although she hated him, and you know, you can hear it, you're still waiting for more. Although she hated him, she couldn't stop smiling at him. Something like that. Okay. Similarly, I have the same sentence, or rather independent clause. The guitar sounded warm and inviting. And I've added the word since. And since is a trigger word there. It should make you prepared for a cause and effect relationship. So if you listen to this, since the guitar sounded warm and inviting, okay, you need more information to make sense of that. We still have a subject, we still have a verb, but since the guitar sounded warm and inviting, I wanted to hear more, right? And then the addition of that second clause completes the idea. But as this stands, the idea is not complete. Okay? So that's the difference between a dependent clause and an independent clause. Both have subjects and verbs, but only the independent clause has a complete idea. Okay, so throughout these lessons, you will learn about the 4 different types of sentences, and we'll start with simple sentences and work our way toward compound complex sentences. So they will get progressively more, not difficult, but complex and complicated as the lessons go along. We've already covered independent and dependent clauses, and some of the last lessons will be dedicated toward phrases, which modify clauses. Okay, so let's start with the simple sentence. And as I mentioned earlier, simple sentences are synonymous with independent clauses. And if you recall, that means that there's a subject, a verb, and a complete idea. So only one subject performing one action, and it projects a complete idea. So she hated him, the guitar sounded warm and inviting, but that doesn't mean that the sentences have to be so short. Here I have a sentence about my dog. Okay, so we have Norman, and that's the subject. Sat is the verb. And then we have a series of phrases that modify the subject. So Norman sat. You could put a period right there. That is a complete idea. However, I've added just a series of phrases here. But you'll notice that in none of these phrases is there a subject and a verb, right? So this is still just a simple sentence. Norman sat on the couch. I could put a period there. Okay, that's still subject, verb, complete idea. Norman sat on the couch with his paws bunched neatly beneath him. Okay, so this is still a simple sentence. I have one subject doing one thing and then a series of phrases that modify the subject. All right, so we oftentimes think of simple sentences as a bit elementary or maybe beneath us, but I want to encourage you to embrace the simple sentence. Don't think of them as non-academic or not college level writing, because they absolutely are. I want you to learn to vary your sentences, and simple sentences are really, really useful when you want to be really, really clear and concise. Maybe you've used a series of complex sentences in your writing, and you want to break through to your reader and go, essentially, this is what I'm telling you. The simple sentence is really, really useful. So I encourage you, do not undervalue the simple sentence. Okay, so here's your first assignment. I want you to write a paragraph, so 5 to 7 sentences. And I want you to only use simple sentences. I want your paragraph to tell a very simple story, and I want that story to focus on one idea, right? So don't write your first sentence about peanut butter, and then the next one about a hammock, and then the next one about a snake, unless there's a relationship there. So let me give you an example. Again, I'll use my dog as the subject of this story. All right, first sentence. Norman paws the bell on the door. He wants to go out again. This is normal for him. He was never meant to be an apartment dog. My wife and I take him and his brother Puck to the park often. He gets plenty of exercise. He loves to run and retrieve the ball. He always manages to get wet and smelly. So you can see here, some of these are easily recognizable as simple sentences, but let's look down here at this fourth sentence. My wife and I, that's a compound subject. Take is the verb. And then we have a compound object, him and his brother Puck, and then a phrase, to the park often. That's a prepositional phrase. But ignore all of that complicated jargon the English teachers speak, and really you have a subject performing an action only once, and that's a simple sentence. Okay, but you can see here the story that I've written is focused on dogs going to the park. Okay, the idea here is pretty simple. When we get to compound sentences and complex sentences and compound complex sentences, I'm going to have you revise this paragraph, this little paragraph story that you've written, to incorporate the different types of sentences. So this will become the foundation for future lessons. So it's really important that you write one that you can live with for the next few videos. Okay, hopefully everything makes sense. If not, feel free to rewind and listen again. All right, see you next lesson.